Hi, it's Katrina. Today we have a special video with some very incredible guests. I have ocean explorers and real-life adventurers, Ashlan and Philippe Cousteau. They went on an expedition to Antarctica and have graciously shared their top 10 most amazing things about Antarctica. And they have also answered questions asked by you, so be sure to give them a warm welcome.
Well, hello everyone. We are Ashlan and Philippe Cousteau. We are explorers and ocean advocates.
And we just got back from a trip to Antarctica, and so we are here to share with you our top 10 coolest things, pun intended, about Antarctica. So starting with number 10, Antarctica is home to krill, the tiniest of superheroes. This tiny little shrimp-like creature measuring somewhere between 1 and 6 centimeters long has a hugely important role to play in Antarctica. Antarctic krill make up the largest krill population globally, estimated at 400 million metric tons. That's a lot of krill. It's at the center of the food web. In fact, every single species in the Southern Ocean either eats krill or eats something else that eats krill. Krill provide 96% of calories for seabirds and mammals in the Antarctic Peninsula. And without krill, most marine life in Antarctica would not be able to survive. There are hundreds of trillions of them, and when they swarm, they are so big, they can be seen from space.
Number 9. So krill are not only important as a food source, they are also climate superheroes as well, absorbing and storing CO2. Antarctic krill feed mainly on plankton, which are tiny floating plants that soak up carbon from the surface water as part of photosynthesis, creating energy to survive. Now they as in the krill, feed off this plankton and dive deep down, injecting carbon to the ocean floor when they poop. Now this has been estimated to be the same amount of carbon that 35 million cars emit each year. That's a lot of poop. Now whales that also feed off krill have poop that is rich in iron, and that in turn helps feed the phytoplankton, and that in turn feeds the krill, resulting in an amazing circle of life. But these little krill fellows have a rough ride. They're being sucked out of the ocean by large factory fishing vessels and ending up in food supplements or in fish food. Antarctic krill are so much more valuable in the ocean than out. And that's just one of the reasons that we need no-take marine protected areas that stops krill fishing in important areas for wildlife, such as areas that penguins use to feed their chicks, but more on that later.
Now, number 8. Antarctica is home to 18 different species of penguins, but only 2 of them live exclusively on the continent of Antarctica. The emperor penguin, made famous by, of course, Happy Feet, and its cute, smaller counterpart, the Adelie. Now, we did see Adelie penguins when we were down in Antarctica. But
we did, and I've been to Antarctica twice, and I miss emperors both times. Very sad.
But their home and, of course, survival are at risk from, you guessed it, climate change and fishing. Antarctic penguin populations have been declining dramatically, some even as much as 75% over the past 50 years. And it's vital that we protect their home and the food that they rely on. And contrary to some popular belief, and maybe some cartoons that we grew up with, there are no polar bears in Antarctica and no penguins in the Arctic. So no, penguins and polar bears never meet.
Now, number 7. As you all know, it is very cold in Antarctica, and some animals actually have antifreeze in their blood. Now, as you can imagine, some of the animals that live in Antarctica, or actually all of the animals that live in Antarctica, are super badass because you need to be when you have made the windiest, coldest, driest, and most hostile environments in the world your home.
Yep.
But the continent is actually teeming with life, and animals have found amazing ways to adapt, including some species of fish that have natural antifreeze in their blood that actually keeps them from freezing. Now, these freaky looking fish are called ice fish, and they don't have any red blood cells. Instead, it has a special protein or special proteins in their blood that act like antifreeze. The proteins bind to ice crystals, keeping them small and prevent the fish from turning into fish popsicles.
Which, if you're an ice fish, that's a good thing. Number 6. Now, that means big. Some invertebrates in the poles, like marine spiders, can be as big as dinner plates. Kind of freaky. Even some single-celled organisms that are normally only visible under a microscope can be as big as a pinky nail. Now, no one's sure why this happens, but one theory is that there's naturally a lot of oxygen in cold water. And these animals that live in cold water, well, they don't move very quickly, so they don't need a lot of oxygen. So what do? They use that oxygen to grow bigger. But that's just a theory. So as you can see, there's still a lot to discover in Antarctica.
We're both big people. Maybe there was too much oxygen.
That might be why we're so tall. Yeah.
All right, number 5. We are learning new things about Antarctica every single day. Now, we still know so little about the continent, and scientific discoveries are being found seriously like almost every hour. Yeah. For example, just a few months ago, scientists found the world's largest known colony of breeding fish off the coast of Antarctica below ice that covers part of the Weddell Sea. And it's like I love them. It's ice fish, baby. Yes, the ones we talked about earlier with antifreeze. It was approximately about 60 million nests were found in an area of about 93 square miles in size. It's a lot of nests.
60 million nests. That's a lot of nests. And number 4, Antarctic ice is pretty cool. Now, 90% of the world's surface fresh water is held in Antarctic ice sheets. Now, Antarctic ice also plays a critical role in regulating the Earth's climate because its white surface acts as an enormous reflector, sending solar radiation and heat back into space and keeping the planet cool. In winter, seasonal sea ice doubles the area of Antarctica. Now, the growth of sea ice generates dense, heavy, salty water that helps drive deep global ocean currents, which regulate the entire Earth's climate, which means weather. The weather that you rely on and we all rely on every day to water our crops and to be a sunny day at the beach, whatever it is, Antarctica. Now, Antarctica has 2 different types of ice. There's land ice, the Antarctic ice sheet, which is the largest mass of ice on the planet at almost twice the size of Australia. And if you actually spread the Antarctic ice sheet across the United States and Mexico, they would be covered in a layer of ice around 7,000 feet thick. That's 2,000 meters. That's a lot of ice. Now, there's also sea ice. So each winter, when it gets really cold, the Antarctic coastline is transformed as the ocean freezes over, surrounding the continent with a fringe of ice as large as the continent itself. At its winter maximum, Antarctic sea ice covers an area of around 11 million square miles. That's 18 million square kilometers, almost twice the size of the US and larger than Antarctica itself. Unfortunately, increasing temperatures mean that ice is melting, with glaciers losing ice at unprecedented rates, impacting global sea level rise and Antarctic ecosystems. In 2021, an important science report by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change predicted sea level will rise between 11 and 21 inches, or 28 and 55 centimeters, by the end of the century. However, they note that a sea level rise of 6 feet or more can't be ruled out as a worst case scenario. Yikes.
Number 3. No one, well, technically no humans, permanently live in Antarctica, but there are residents that are down there. So there's over 30 different countries that operate around 80 research stations on the continent. Most people are there during the summer months, around 4,000 people, and that drops down to about 1,000 during the long, cold, harsh winters. And many of the people are scientists and researchers that study all sorts of different things, from weather, wildlife, icebergs, and glaciers.
Number 2. Antarctica belongs to all of us, including you. Now, Antarctica is part of the global commons, which means that it belongs to no single individual country or state, but to all of us. Via the Antarctic Treaty System that was agreed in 1959, the entire continent is dedicated to peace and science. And on the continent, all extractive activities, like mining, have been banned. Unfortunately, the waters around Antarctica are still open to extraction, and countries are fishing there for krill and things like Antarctic toothfish, which has been rebranded as Antarctic cod, even though...
Because nobody wants to eat a
Nobody wants
toothfish.
to eat a toothfish, except it's not a cod. That's just some shifty rebranding. And of course, all of that overfishing is competing with wildlife that also need to feed.
Which brings us to our number one interesting fact about Antarctica. The protection of its waters are still limited despite being one of the most amazing and fragile places on Earth. Now, Antarctica and its waters are seen as being very important to the health of our planet and to our climate. Yet protection of these waters has been very limited. There's only 2 areas that have been protected because action continues to be stalled by governments that are members of this little known but very important organization, the Commission for the Conservation of Antarctic Marine Living Resources, or CAMLAR for short. Now, why should we care? Because what happens in Antarctica does not stay in Antarctica. And while it may seem so far away, the impacts that it is experiencing will not be localized. They will affect the whole planet, from changes in our climate to sea level rise and changes in how the ocean functions as a whole will have knock-on effects. So if you learned everything from us today, it is that Antarctica is cool, it's exciting, and it needs our protection.
Yeah, and if you want to help, then you can join us and sign a simple petition for the protection of Antarctica's waters at only.1/act/Antarctica. And all of us can build a hopeful, better world for the future.
And now for some questions you asked. But first, be sure to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. For many people, Jacques Cousteau was their childhood hero. So what made you want to carry on the family legacy?
My grandfather, Jacques Cousteau, and my father, Philippe Sr., were pioneers of ocean exploration and filmmaking. Of course, I grew up with those films. And though I never knew my father, he died 6 months before I was born in an airplane accident, I still had his books and movies and all the things that he'd done. And, those adventures were amazing. My grandfather, told me growing up all the stories and all the amazing places that he went. And it was like real life Indiana Jones. And frankly, I was like, yeah, I want to do this. Like, this is the coolest thing ever. So it wasn't a hard decision when I got an opportunity to continue in the spirit of that work.
What was your first expedition?
What was my first expedition? My first expedition was to Papua New Guinea. I was 16 years old and got to do some pretty amazing research there with Dr. Eugenie Clark, one of my heroes, one of the pioneering female oceanographers. Diving with sharks and exploring like skull caves up in mountains of abandoned, like lost civilizations. I mean, it really was like Indiana Jones. But yeah.
My very first expedition, like proper expedition, is when we went to Bikini Atoll to film how shark populations had surprisingly come back after the United States had detonated some of the largest nuclear bombs, well, the largest nuclear bombs we've ever detonated to date. And that was really incredible. That was for nuclear sharks that we did for Shark Week. And that was just incredible. So just incredible experience and something I'll always remember.
Now, what are some of the exciting projects we're working on? Well, 20 years ago, almost 20 years ago now, I founded Earth Echo International. We've become one of the leading global youth education organizations, and we're building a global youth movement to restore and protect our ocean. And that's always exciting, working with youth leaders, passionate young people in over 140 countries that are taking action to help restore and protect our oceans. We're working on TV shows and animated series.
And one thing right here, by the way, whoop whoop, if you want to learn more about the ocean in general and how cool the ocean is, we wrote the book Oceans for Dummies, which is really just that
was one of our COVID projects.
It's a fun, easygoing, but deep dive into our oceans and how they work.
What are some of the most shocking changes you've seen in the ocean over the years?
A lot. And I think it's interesting because I have, in Ashlan as well now, as we have this generational.
Okay, it's usually 3, but I guess that was only 2. Sorry.
Personally, growing up with my grandfather's films like Silent World from the 1950s, like I grew up in the south of France as well, and in part back and forth from the U.S. to France, and And snorkeling in those places, and you look at the footage from the 1950s and 1960s, and then you go back to those same places today, and where there were once schools of sharks and giant grouper and reefs and all sorts of amazing things, there's now just algae and a few little fish poking around. So, we have chronicled the modern era of ocean exploration, my family, but we've also, as part of that, witnessed the decline of the health of the ocean around the world, and it's pretty horrific.
And I think too, just the shocking amount of large changes that are happening in our ocean. Everything from the acidity level. Ocean acidification is a huge issue. The ocean's actually getting more acidic, and any creature that actually has to bind calcium carbonate for their shell is making it harder for them to do that. That's everybody from krill to oysters to mollusks to
coral reefs.
Yeah. The water is warming, and the sea level is rising. So there's some really, really big issues out there. But the good news is we know what works, and we know that marine protected areas work, and marine protected areas will actually can save these areas and make the ocean healthier and give it a better fighting chance in the face of these huge issues.
Why is Antarctica so important?
I think we covered that in the top 10.
Yes, but still, Antarctica is important because it is the air conditioning of our planet. It controls our climate, including our weather and the rain that falls. Even if you live in the middle of a country with no ocean, you still,
your life is impacted. Yeah,
thanks to
by Antarctica. It drives food for the global ocean food web, of course, which feeds hundreds of millions of people and is so important to the entire system as it works.
Helps give us oxygen, available oxygen in our atmosphere to breathe. And
the largest carbon sink on Earth, Antarctica, and the Southern Ocean surrounding it, and of course provides food to the entire ocean food web. So kind of important.
Kind of a big deal.
Yeah, and when we were down there, we got to witness just a little bit of that. But it's in a majestic, wild, far off, amazing place that even if you're landlocked and you're never near the ocean, affects your life.
What's the scariest expedition you've been on?
They haven't been scary.
Nuclear sharks. There was a couple points where we had like 60 or 70 sharks swirling around us and bumping into us and like coming to check us out. That was a little hairy. Some of the dives of Caribbean Pirate Treasure with the currents and the zero visibility.
That's true.
I think I toughened her up. She's doing some stuff now that she doesn't even realize that, like, oh wow, that was actually really scary. We almost died. So listen, there's all sorts of wild things out there. I would say though that frankly, I've never really felt like, our lives were really in danger because we plan well. The only times I've ever been on an expedition where I felt like my life was in danger was actually being threatened by people, which is much longer stories. But yes,
yeah, that's true. We've been with sharks, and we've been with lots of sharks and big animals, and we've never felt afraid.
Yeah.
Except from humans.
Yeah, exactly.
What's your favorite spot to explore that you would never get tired of? Any recommendations?
Acapulco, Mexico. Yeah. It is a beautiful, protected no-take marine reserve, and it is absolutely gorgeous. And the wildlife there is incredible. The people are lovely, and all you want to do is put a tank on your back, flop in the water, and just look around for days on end.
I would say mine is both Cabo Pulmo is one of my favorites. It's up there, but my favorite is Shabarumi Reef off of the Red Sea, where my grandfather built the Con Shelf 2 expedition in the 1960s. That place was and is still amazing. The ruins of that underwater living habitat still exist, and the reef is amazing. And there's schooling hammerheads. I visited for a show for BBC years ago, and it's definitely a place I would never get tired of going back to.
How do you inspire and educate people?
Through the media, and
I think
Ashlan wrote most of Oceans for Dummies.
Yeah, I think through everything that we do, and including Earth Echo, our books, our television series, our documentaries, we just always try to make the ocean accessible and exciting, and really just hope that you all fall in love with the ocean and realize how important it is to us every single day, and places like Antarctica.
What would you say to people who don't believe in global warming or climate change?
We've been at this a long time. We've kind of given up trying to convince people. If they are willfully ignorant and want to completely ignore all the same science that gives them modern medicine and engineering of cars and all these things that we like take for granted and accept, but they decide that they don't want to believe the science behind climate change, really hard to convince them. The good news is I have never walked into a classroom or a group of young people anywhere in the world that are like, climate change doesn't exist. So the good news is that there's a generation of young people out there that don't question that. All they want to do is do something about it and solve that problem. So we don't waste our time. If you want to be ignorant, then I'm not going to convince you otherwise in 30 seconds or 20 minutes or an hour. That's your choice, unfortunately, but we just move on and work with the vast majority of people that don't question things like, science.
Science!
What can people do from home? How can people participate?
Honestly, everything you do makes a difference, be it a positive or a negative difference for our planet and for our ocean and for Antarctica. So really everything that you do, look at plastic. How can you buy less plastic? How can you use less plastic? How can you reduce your carbon footprint, be it by taking a bike or walking instead of driving your car? We only have one car between the two of us, and we've made that work even with 2 kids and even during COVID. Really anything, try to cut out harsh chemicals, harsh cleaning chemicals around your house. Water and vinegar does amazing things.
Yep.
And saves you money. And really just try to, next time you think you need something, ask yourself, do you really need it?
Yeah.
Or could you find something else to use instead?
So there you have it. Thanks so much to this amazing couple. Again, if you want to learn more, check out earthecho.org, as well as Awesome Planet on Fox and Hulu. Together, Ashlan and Philippe have done numerous TV specials and shows, so be sure to check them out if you want to learn more. Remember to subscribe before you leave, and let me know if you'd like to see more videos like these. See you next time. Bye!